Yeah, so this is an election that is unlike any that has ever happened in my lifetime, and unfortunately not in a very happy way. Um, if Trump wins this election, it will be the end of liberalism. It will very likely be the end of American democracy. I fear in my more catastrophist moments that it could be the end of the world, that he could have a narcissistic moment of a desire to blow up the world. Um, I've had throughout these elections, but in particular in the past few months, this kind of creepy, nauseating Weimar-esque feeling as if we were back in Germany in 1932. And the new right, has taken over the political spectrum. This phenomenon, and I'm not sure all foreigners understand this, it really began here in the 2008 elections with Sarah Palin. The alliance between Sarah Palin and John McCain struck me at the time and now as that frightening marriage between the old right and the new right that we saw in Europe in the 1930s. And not only in Germany, you see it in Romania with Antonescu and the Iron Guard, you see it in Hungary with Horthy and the Arrow Cross. But in 2008, even McCain got scared at a certain point. He was not somebody I would have voted for anyway. He was not somebody I particularly liked. But he was not a lunatic. I mean, he represented an old conservative elite with a certain traditional sense of American values. And if there's a racism there, which I think there is, it was in any case, a subtle racism and not an overt, let's go out on the street and lynch people racism. Sarah Palin opened the door to the let's go out on the street and lynch people kind of racism.
And you think and so what unleashed Trump?
That's a good question. Why now? Why this particular configuration? I don't have a very good answer to that, except that it's understandable why people are angry. This anger against mainstream politics, the frustration with the system, the sense of being disenfranchised, that's understandable. And it's understandable that a large percentage of the working class is angry. Unfortunately, they're not directing their anger, in a constructive direction, and they don't particularly understand well the causes for their disenfranchisement and the causes of their hardships. And it's a resort to a very primitive and very old scapegoating mechanism. If I'm struggling, if I'm working a minimum wage job, if I can't feed my family, if we don't have access to decent health care, if our neighborhoods are infested with gun violence, if our schools are terrible, then it must be because of the Mexicans or the Muslims or the African Americans who are exploiting our welfare system. Of course, it's not because of any of these groups of people. There are deep pathologies in the system. I've become very disillusioned with the system since Obama's presidency, and not because I've been disillusioned with Obama per se. I think he was the person we had coming in who understood better perhaps than anyone else, with the possible exception of Bill Clinton, although I'm not sure of that, during my lifetime, what the pathologies of the system are. I mean, he had spent time on the streets in Chicago. He understood the despair of the violence. I mean, he understood the class problems. He understood how race was overlaid on class problems. He understood how if you don't guarantee people some basic decent conditions of living, you cannot then expect good behavior from them. You cannot then expect them to buy into a social contract. And the ideas he had, especially domestically, I mean, he's much weaker in foreign policy than he is in domestic policy, that we need universal health care, that we need gun control laws, that we need to make upward mobility possible by making it possible for kids from poor families to get the kind of education that will get them good jobs. He understood what needed to be done, but he was unable to do it. He was unable to do it because the political system was blocked, because the power of the lobbyists to buy Congress has gotten so extreme that effectively we're now an oligarchy, because the power of billionaires to buy elections, especially since the Citizens United ruling, has become so extreme. And when I saw how he threw all his energy that first year in office into getting healthcare reform passed, which we desperately needed, and he couldn't do it. In the end, we get a very watered down version, which was better than what we had, but by far not enough. He threw an extraordinary amount of energy into it. And my feeling was he was the best chance we had. That was the A team. We don't actually have a better team than that. And if he failed, then my feeling was the system is stuck. The system is not working. There's something deeply broken in American politics. And it's understandable that people are frustrated. At the primitiveness of the scapegoating mechanism, the resort to identity politics, and what I think is kind of most important, that license to express your frustration and your anger in any kind of cruel way that feels satisfying to you. I mean, it really is this kind of "Sil pozvolono" moment, like in Dostoevsky. It's the liberation of feeling like everything is permitted. That's what Trump gives to people. And Trump also in this way is right out of the 1930s, when Freud describes in Civilization and its Discontents, that repression is the precondition for civilization. We have these instincts of eros and thanatos, of lust and desire and of death and aggression. And civilization is about controlling those instincts. It's about repressing them. And for that reason, it will always make us unhappy because we'll always be repressed. But Freud says there is no other way. The alternative is barbarism. This is why he loses to Marx, because Marx promises you a happily ever after. Freud promises you no happily ever after. He says this is deep in the fundamental preconditions for the functioning of any kind of civilization at all. And what Trump brings people is a release from that repression. He says, okay, there are no more rules. I don't recognize rules. Now you can give full expression to all your anger, to all your desire for violence, to all your desire for lust. Now everything is permitted. And that feels very liberating. But the price we pay for that is the destruction of civilization. Well, I would say that we're very isolated here in a certain way. The technology that determines, or that provides politicians with information about the demographics and electoral preferences of a certain demographic has become very, very precise. And we have a winner-takes-all system on a federal level. That means that whoever wins each state almost always gets all the electoral votes from that state, which means if it's already clear which way a state is going to vote, there's no reason for a campaign to put any money or attention into that state. New Haven in 2008 went 85% for Obama. And there were people like me who were thinking, but who could that 15% be? We've never encountered that 15%. New Haven is a very, very democratic city. The universities are always going to be democratic. Even in Republican states, the university towns will be democratic. And in New Haven, you have a population that is divided between a very elite university, and a generally quite impoverished local population. But for those overdetermined reasons, both those populations are going to be democratic. So I very rarely encounter anybody here. In fact, it's not even clear to me that I've had a personal conversation with anybody in New Haven who would be a Trump supporter. And I have not even seen a single Trump sign in New Haven. The first time I saw Trump signs was when my family and I went to visit my parents in Pennsylvania this past weekend. And then driving to Pennsylvania, we saw Trump signs. But I have not seen a single one in New Haven. In fact, in New Haven, you don't even see very many Clinton signs because everybody knows which way New Haven is going to vote, and so there's no attention here. And the real activists are out in Ohio or Florida or Pennsylvania in the so-called swing states, and they're putting their energy there.
And you said about this impoverished population, so what is that? This divide in New Haven? The
divide we have in New Haven is, on the one hand, it's extreme. On the other hand, it's extremely typical of inner city problems in America. What makes it perhaps feel more extreme in New Haven is because New Haven is a small city, whereas a place like Detroit is a much larger city. But the industry here collapsed decades ago. There was a port industry. a shipping industry. There's a very large section of the population with a high unemployment rate and with a high rate of living below the poverty line. And what perhaps isn't always understood is that while Americans have public education, those public schools are funded by local property taxes. So if you have an area or a district or a town or a part of the town where property values are low, that means those school districts effectively have no money. That means the schools are bad. And once the schools are bad, then the kids don't have a chance. And so then you're in this cycle of poverty. We also have a violence problem. We have a huge gun violence problem in New Haven. There are shootings constantly, in New Haven. There are also shootings constantly in many other American cities. And this is not, Europeans don't always understand this, it's not political violence per se. It's kind of ordinary street violence. It's the same kind of violence you get in other countries when, drunk men are coming home at night, and somebody says something about somebody else's girlfriend, and in another country they would beat one another up. But here, because everybody has a gun, they shoot one another, and then other people accidentally get shot, because bullets don't always go exactly where they're intended. So there's a climate of violence. A lot of the schools themselves are dangerous. The kids don't feel safe going to schools. Even for philanthropic groups trying to support those failing school districts, it's very hard for them to hire tutors or hire people to even go into the schools because people don't feel safe going into the schools. There are whole neighborhoods the police have essentially given up on. And then you have the whole cycle of poverty and violence and high rates of teenage pregnancy, and improper health care because we don't have a universal health care system, and weak education that puts people in a vicious cycle of never being able to get out from this kind of poverty.